1990, a construction crew tearing down an old house in Providence, Rhode Island, made a discovery that would bring a 129-year-old ghost back to life. Hidden behind a wall panel, wrapped in cloth, was a leather pouch. Inside, letters. Letters that were never supposed to be found. Letters written by men who knew, absolutely knew, they were about to die. But here's what you need to understand. These weren't just ordinary goodbye letters. One of them contained a secret so devastating that when historians finally pieced together the full story, it changed how we understand love, sacrifice, and the true cost of war. By the end of this video, you're going to know something that only a handful of historians have discovered. Something hidden in these words for over a century. Something that will make you see these wars and these men completely differently. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's start with July 14th, 1861, and a man who had exactly 7 days left to live. Sullivan Ballou was 32 years old, a lawyer, a father of 2 boys. He had everything to live for. But on July 14th, 1861, in a military camp just outside Washington, D.C., he sat down with pen and paper, and he wrote something extraordinary. "My very dear wife," he began, and right from the start, you can feel it. He knows. Let me read you his exact words. "Indications are very strong that we shall move in a few days, perhaps tomorrow. Lest I should not be able to write you again, I feel impelled to write a few lines that may fall under your eye when I shall be no more." When I shall be no more. Those 6 words. He didn't write, "If I die." He wrote, "When I shall be no more." This wasn't optimism. This wasn't a soldier boosting morale. This was a man saying goodbye. Now here's where this gets interesting. Sullivan Ballou was fighting for the Union in the American Civil War. He believed in his cause. He believed in his country. But listen to what he writes next, because this is where the letter becomes almost unbearably honest. "But my dear wife, when I know that with my own joys I lay down nearly all of yours, and replace them in this life with care and sorrows. When, after having eaten for long years the bitter fruit of orphanage myself, I must offer it, as their only sustenance, to my dear little children." Sullivan himself grew up as an orphan. He knew, from personal painful experience, exactly what he was about to do to his own sons. And he was doing it anyway. But then he writes something that stopped me cold the first time I read it. "Sarah, my love for you is deathless. It seems to bind me with mighty cables that nothing but omnipotence can break. And yet, my love of country comes over me like a strong wind, and bears me irresistibly on with all those chains to the battlefield." Think about those words. Mighty cables that nothing but omnipotence can break. This is a man torn in half. His love for his wife, his children, it's not weak, it's not secondary. It's powerful enough that only God could break it. And yet, here he is, marching toward death anyway. 7 days later, on July 21st, 1861, at the First Battle of Bull Run, Major Sullivan Ballou was hit by Confederate artillery. A shell tore through his leg. In the chaos of a Union retreat, he was left behind. For a week, he lay dying in a makeshift Confederate field hospital. No morphine, no comfort, no wife holding his hand. Just pain, infection, and the slow realization that he would never see Sarah again. He died on July 29th, 1861, 2 weeks after writing that letter. Now here's the twist that makes this story haunt me. The letter? It was never mailed. Sullivan Ballou wrote the most beautiful goodbye in American history, poured his soul onto paper, and then something happened. Maybe he changed his mind. Maybe he thought it would hurt Sarah too much. Maybe in those final moments he wanted her to remember him as confident and strong, not torn apart by doubt. That letter sat undelivered, unfound, gathering dust in military archives until 1990, when filmmaker Ken Burns discovered it while researching his Civil War documentary. It took 129 years for Sullivan Ballou to finally say goodbye to his wife, except Sarah had been dead for 73 years. But Sullivan's letter isn't the only one, and it's not even the most devastating. Jump forward 53 years, November 1914. The war to end all wars has just begun. Millions of men across Europe are about to discover that war isn't glory. It's not honor. It is mud and blood and terror, and the slow realization that you might die in a trench for a few yards of worthless ground. And they started writing letters. Thousands of them. Millions of them. Most of these letters were optimistic. "Don't worry, Mother, I'll be home by Christmas. The war will be over soon, and we're giving them hell." But some soldiers told the truth. In 1916, somewhere in the mud of France, a soldier whose name we don't even know sat in a trench and wrote what might be the most brutally honest letter of World War I. We know almost nothing about him. We don't know his regiment. We don't know where he was from. We only know that in 2008, a metal detector enthusiast found his skeleton in a former battlefield, and in his pocket, preserved by chance and mud, was a letter. It was addressed to his mother, and it was never finished. "Dear Mother, I am writing this from the trench. I don't know if I will be able to post it. We've been told we go over the top at dawn. They say it will be quick. They're lying. I've seen 4 offensives now, it's never quick. I want you to know that I tried to be brave. I want you to know that I thought of you and Father and Mary every day. But Mother, I'm so afraid. I'm more afraid than I've ever been in my life. And I can't tell anyone here because we all pretend we're not afraid, but we are, Mother. God help us, we're all terrified." And then the letter just stops, mid-sentence. Because at dawn he went over the top, and he never came back. We don't even know his name, but we know he died without finishing his goodbye. And that letter, the one that should have told his mother the truth about his fear, his love, of his humanity, stayed in his pocket as his body was buried by mud and time and the endless artillery bombardment that turned the Western Front into hell on earth. For 92 years, his mother never knew what happened to her son. She died not knowing if he was brave, if he was afraid, or if he thought of her at the end. But we know now, because of that letter. This pattern repeated itself thousands of times across the Western Front. Soldiers writing letters they hoped would never be needed, folding them, putting them in their pockets, just in case. Some were found, most were not. But one man, one extraordinary man, decided he wouldn't leave his story to chance. His name was Louis Barthas. He was 35 years old when World War I broke out, a barrel maker from a small wine-growing town in southern France. He had a wife, a daughter, a quiet life making wine barrels. In August 1914, he was called up to serve. And unlike most soldiers, Louis decided to document everything. For 4 solid years, Louis Barthas kept notebooks. He wrote during bombardments. He wrote while hiding from sniper fire. He wrote in freezing trenches while rats gnawed on the corpses of his friends. He wrote it all down. Not for glory, not for propaganda, for truth. Let me read you something he wrote in December 1915, after surviving the slaughter at Champagne. "Tonight I watched a young soldier, barely 19, try to write a letter to his mother. His hands were shaking so badly from cold and fear that he couldn't hold the pen. I helped him write it. Dear Mama, I am well. The food is good. Don't worry about me." Every word was a lie. He wasn't well. The food was spoiled. We were all slowly dying. But what else could he write? The truth? That we live like animals? That we're covered in mud and lice? That we haven't slept more than 2 hours at a time in 3 weeks? That yesterday, a shell landed in the trench next to ours, and when we went to help, there was nothing left to help? Just pieces? No, he couldn't write that, so he lied. We all lied, because the truth would destroy them. Louis Barthas survived the war, somehow. He witnessed the mutinies of 1917, when French soldiers finally said enough and refused to attack. He saw men shot by their own officers for cowardice. He saw poison gas. He saw tanks. He saw the birth of modern industrial warfare. And when it was finally over on November 11th, 1918, Louis Barthas went home, put his notebooks in a drawer, and never spoke about the war again. Not to his wife, not to his daughter, not to anyone. Those notebooks sat unread for 59 years. Louis died in 1952, taking his stories with him. It wasn't until 1977, long after everyone who knew him was dead, that a historian discovered the notebooks and published them. Today, Poilu, the World War I, Notebooks of Louis Barthas, is considered one of the most important first-hand accounts of trench warfare ever written. But Louis never knew that. He died thinking his story, his truth, would die with him. But I still haven't told you the most devastating letter. For that, we need to go back to the trenches. And we need to talk about a man named Charles. In the spring of 1917, a British officer named Captain Charles May was preparing for one of the most infamous battles of World War I, the Battle of Arras. Military historians estimate that 160,000 British soldiers would become casualties in just 39 days. Charles May knew the odds. Everyone did. The battle plan was insane. Send waves of men across open ground into machine gun fire and hope that enough survived to take the German trenches. On April 8, 1917, the night before the assault, Charles sat down and wrote 2 letters, one to his parents and one to his wife. The letter to his parents was what you'd expect. Duty, honor, confidence. I go forward gladly to do my part. If I should fall, know that I died for a righteous cause. But the letter to his wife, that's different. Charles and his wife, whom we only know as Dearest M, had been married for less than 2 years. She was pregnant with their first child. And Charles knew, absolutely knew, that he wasn't coming back from this assault. So he made her a promise. And it's this promise that breaks my heart every time I read it. Tomorrow we attack. I cannot lie to you as I have lied to mother and father. I have seen what happens in these assaults. I have seen it 4 times now. Tomorrow will be my 5th. And I do not think there will be a 6th. But here is my promise to you, my darling. If there is any way, any possible way, that I can come back to you, I will. If I am wounded, I will crawl back. If I am dying, I will drag myself to you. Even if I have to claw my way back from death itself, I will find you again. And if I cannot, if this is truly goodbye, then know that my last thought will be of you. Not of England, not of duty. You. Always you. And our child. God. Our child. I'm so sorry I won't be there to meet him. Or her. I'm sorry I won't teach them to ride a bicycle or help with their homework or walk them down the aisle. I'm sorry I'm breaking my promise to always be there for you both. But Em, listen to me. You must promise me something in return. You must promise me that you will be happy again, that you will smile again, that you will find joy again. Not now, not soon, but eventually. Because if I die tomorrow knowing that I've stolen your happiness forever, then this death means nothing. Promise me, my darling. Promise me you'll live. Forever yours, Charles. Captain Charles May died on April 9, 1917, at 5:43 in the morning. He made it approximately 150 yards before German machine gun fire cut him down. He was 28 years old. His wife received the letter 3 weeks later. She was 4 months pregnant. She gave birth to a daughter in October 1917. She named her Charlotte, after Charles. Charles's wife lived to be 87 years old. She died in 1983. She never remarried. She kept that letter for 66 years, and when she died, her daughter Charlotte found it among her possessions, along with a worn photograph of a man Charlotte had never met, her father. Did Charles's wife ever find happiness again? Did she ever smile without sadness behind it? Did she keep her promise to him? We don't know. But I think about her sometimes. I think about what it must have been like to read that letter, to feel him begging you to live, to be happy, to find joy, while simultaneously saying goodbye forever. How do you keep that promise? How do you be happy when the person who made you happiest is gone? Charles made her a promise that if there was any way to come back, he would. He broke that promise, not by choice, but he broke it. And she made him a promise that she would be happy again. I don't know if she kept it. So here we are. 4 different wars, 4 different men, 4 different letters. But if you look closely, if you really look, there's a pattern. Sullivan Ballou promised Sarah he would hover near her always, that his spirit would never leave her. If the dead can come back to this earth and flit unseen around those they loved, I shall always be near you. The unknown French soldier from 1916 promised his mother he tried to be brave, even though he was terrified. Louis Barthas didn't make promises in letters. He kept a promise by writing truth, that future generations would know what really happened in those trenches. Charles May promised his wife he would come back if he could, and made her promise to be happy. What are these letters really? They're not just goodbyes. They're promises made by men who knew they couldn't keep them. Promises to wives who would be widows, to mothers who would bury sons, to children who would grow up without fathers. They're the promises we make when we know we're out of time, when all we have left is words on paper and hope. Desperate, impossible hope, that somehow those words will be enough. But here's the thing that haunts me. Here's the secret I promised you at the beginning of this video. These letters were found. We can read them. We can cry over them. We can honor them. But for every letter that was found, how many weren't? How many soldiers died with letters in their pockets that were never recovered? How many promises were made that nobody will ever know about? How many last words were lost to mud, fire, time, and forgetting? The letters we have, the ones I've shared with you today, they are not special because these men were more eloquent or more loving than others. They're special because by pure chance someone found them. Sullivan Ballou's letter sat in archives for 129 years before anyone thought to read it. Louis Barthas's notebook sat in a drawer for 59 years. The unknown French soldier's letter was in the ground for 92 years. Charles May's letter was in a box in an attic for 66 years. Every year, archaeologists working on former battlefields find more bodies, more bones, more remnants of men who went to war and never came home. Sometimes they find letters. Most times they don't. These men are gone. Their wars are over. The countries they fought for have changed beyond recognition. But their letters remain. Their words remain. Their love remains. And remembering that these were real people with real loves and real fears, then maybe, just maybe, those promises aren't broken after all. Isn't just one letter. It's all of them. It's every goodbye that was ever written by someone who knew they were out of time.